Thanks for downloading this episode of the Nerdball Podcast. Fresh off episode 200, we come out with 201 with a bang. This is a great episode. It starts off with a lot of leadership talk, which, as you all know, I love talking about leadership stuff. And then it gets into the Perrysburg Heights Community dilemma, saga, I don't know what you want to call it, issues. But Leah, our guest, really dives really dives deep into that and gives me a perspective of really what's going on, because I knew a very base level, as you're hearing the podcast, of what's happening. So to hear, what's happening in this community and what has been happening for years and years and years was really eye-opening. And if you feel like getting involved or want more information, check out the show notes. It's got Facebook page, Instagram, TikTok, email. It's got all that stuff to contact information if you want to get involved. But I want to get right to this episode. Started off with leadership and then really got into the nitty gritty of the Perrysburg Heights community. So if you're so inclined, again, check out the show notes. Again, thanks for downloading. Hope you enjoy the episode.
My name is Leah and DeLaO Ponce, and this is the Nerdball Podcast.
This is the Nerdball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
Hello, Leah. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Hey.
We talked before. You're a little tired, so I do appreciate you making time. I never know, because 9 works out really well for me because I have kids and a lot of times we're doing things or going places. So whenever I text people like 9 a.m., I'm like, all right, it's a 50-50 shot. They're gonna be like, no, that's too early. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. I feel like I need to get on. I've been listening to a lot of leadership and podcasts and reading some leadership books. And they say that you got to be part of that 5 a.m. club. So there's progression. I maybe only hit the snooze maybe now 2 or 3 times. Now it's trying to get myself to the gym, because if maybe I can do that, maybe I'll have more success with that 5 a.m. thing. So
I do want to. So a lot of the times I ask the question of what have you been nerding out? What are you into lately? But it sounds like leadership stuff, huh?
Yeah, leadership. So I took on a new role with my organization. Actually, it all started when I moved back to the Perrysburg area more full time, and so I founded. We have business resource groups in my organization, and so they had asked me, "Hey, Leah, we don't have anything here in Northwest Ohio. Can you start something?" Because I sat on the Hispanic Chamber here in Columbus when I was in Columbus full time. And then I also sat on the American Heart Association board, and I did a couple of other stuff here. Volunteer is mainly my thing. If I could get paid for volunteering, I would do that all the time.
Oh, me too.
I mean, I love every bit of it. So then when I went back to Northwest Ohio, to the Perrysburg area, was like, okay, you're right. I got to do something. I got to get out of this, work from home setting. And so I started to do a business leadership group. We have individual ones. I started the Hispanic leadership group. Now Northwest Ohio has that group, an Asian BRG, an LGBTQ plus BRG. They now have a full inclusion council BRG. They partner with South Eastern Michigan. So they work in the Detroit area and then all through the Northwest Ohio region. So yeah, I was like, I'm a little out of my league a little bit, because some of these people have been doing it for decades, and I'm in operations for my everyday job. So I was like, can't be that much different. So then COVID happened. So we had to stop a lot of what we were doing and go virtual. So I had to try to engage colleagues, because up in Northwest Ohio is completely different from Central Ohio. It is mainly retail driven. So we don't have a lot of, bigger offices. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. And then they gave me that opportunity and getting a different position in Central Ohio. And so it's just been nothing but catching up on leadership. I feel like I'm on a fast track, but because I'm so far behind. I mean, a lot of these people are 10, 15 years older than me and have been doing it way longer. So coming in with a fresh perspective is kind of hard, So I'm like, I got to figure out what's going on, what was cool back then and what's going on now to try to, make it happen and make it work.
You know,
So
a lot of those groups though need younger leadership or younger influence, right? But you're right. There is a balance of a new person coming in with new perspectives, but hopefully the leadership that is there is open to that kind of stuff. And it sounds like they are, because otherwise they wouldn't have let you in the first
yeah,
place. Like, hey,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I always say having a seat at the table is only part of the step. You got to be able to have a seat at the table, earn to keep that seat,
yeah.
you know, and then also be able to speak and be recognized for what you're saying, give validity to what you're saying. And that's kind of hard, you know, when you are the fresh perspective, you
Mhm.
know, and it's challenged me a lot, you know, but I've learned a lot of skills. I got some skills I didn't even know I had. So it's nice to be able to even get the opportunity. So now with the opportunity, I definitely got to execute.
You know, you're probably it sounds like you're a lot like me as far as like when you are put in these leadership roles, you're not just gonna like if you're in a meeting, you're there for a meeting and you're gonna input. Like I remember when I became a supervisor, I went to my first supervisor meeting and like I was already like talking and saying things and like because that I'm not just I'll hear you. Yes, I want to hear people. But
Yes.
I want to give my input because I think it's valuable. And my boss even told me that, you know, we went out to lunch last Friday and he even said like, you know, I can tell in those supervisors meetings that people like expect you to say something or to speak up because you do that quite often and they look up to you even though you're a newer supervisor. I mean, we're all in reality at the Metro Parks, we're all new supervisors. I think there's like one or two that have been there for forever, but every other supervisor has been hired I think within the past 3 years.
Hmm.
So when you bring in a bunch of newer people, they still look for like quote unquote a leader of the group. And if there's an opening, that's I'm gonna take that opening.
Yeah. Good for you. We actually, so with, you know, we'll get into, you know, what I'm currently doing for my
Mhm.
community, but with that, I have had some really great conversations with, you know, individuals in the community setting and then also in my leadership setting of there is a large gap right now with youth of diversity
Mm.
to come into these, you know, table settings or however you want to put it. And where are the older generation and the younger generation doing to kind of give a hand up to that next generation to bring it in so we have more people with fresh perspective. Um, and so we talked about that. We also talk about like, yeah, when I am in a setting, I know some people are probably like, oh, there goes Leah. There she goes, running her mouth again. Like, here we go, you know?
But it's
But
expected. But a lot of times it's expected, and it's not necessarily negatively. They're saying that kind of stuff. Yeah.
you just have to, like, if you're not speaking, then why are you there? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you're gonna be in that type of setting, come talk and agree to disagree. Like we have to have tough conversations in
Mm-hmm.
order to get somewhere. So yeah, I'm here for it. I know a lot of my leadership are always like, Leah's always going against the grain. Like she always wants to she'll follow the rule, but then she's like, but let's veer here to see what's over here. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, like you said, they're open to it. So I'm going to take the opportunity. I mean, I'm very cognizant of knowing when I've overstepped boundaries. Unfortunately, sometimes I've stepped on them and not knowing, you know, because you sometimes you don't know, you know, kind of what the culture is or how to react or, you know, what's appropriate and what's not. Because when I'm in those settings, like you said, I'm giving me. So me is not perfect. Me is not knowing everything that's going on around me. Me is coming in at a time where there may have been people for 15 years and they've been doing it a certain way. I mean, even me now, seeing a youth come in underneath me in my everyday job, I have to keep an open mind. And
Yeah.
so that's hard too, because you're like, well, we haven't been doing it that way. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm that person that I complain about every time.
I love that part when they because I am really open to ideas as a supervisor, and if I have a seasonal come up to me or one of my workers, they go, "Hey, we're gonna you asked us to do whatever project, but we want to try it this way." And I've said it here on the podcast before. I empower my staff to make decisions without having to contact me first. Like make a decision, and I tell them like I got your back. Like
Yeah.
if it doesn't work out, and we'll fix it, and then we learn, and that's how we do things. The only time I'm not going to have your back is if you did something unsafe and you knowingly did something unsafe. But other than that, I'll have your back. We'll figure it out. I want to empower them to, like, you got to be able to make decisions. You got to be able to say, do I need a 3-inch screw or a 4-inch screw, like without calling me or one of the other managers there, and you can just make that decision and then live with it, and then we'll talk about it.
I think that's definitely some of our upbringing, like, I think our parents allowed us to venture out a little bit. And I think a part of it for me personally is because they don't know. They didn't
Yeah.
know at the time. So it was kind of like, I'm going to have your back because I'm your parent. And that's kind of how we have to be in our culture. I mean, I'm not a great delegator. That's always been a fault of mine for my team. And even my team calls me out on it because I'm that open about it. They're all like, Lee, you got to let us learn. They got to let us, you got to let us grow. And even with the community side, like even my own cousin and my own family were like, you got to let other people help. You got to let other people come in. But I think I have a little bit of a fault, and not to, have like a Dr. Phil moment with you, but I think a fault to it is because I carry the burden of the success of whatever it is I'm doing. And I don't want to bring others down in the sense of not preparing them. And then I think to myself, but again, that's because you don't want to delegate.
Yeah.
So it's like a catch-22. I'm trying to be protective, but at the same time, I'm not doing anybody any good. So that is part of the reason I started leading, listening to some of these leadership skills, because I was like, I got to learn how to like make it work, but kind of give it my own twist, because I think us as individuals is really what makes people successful, is how we come in with that fresh perspective, how we come in and give them the opportunity to do things. So you're right. You got to let people make decisions. And to be honest with you, critical thinking skills are very, very hard to come by, and that's hard to teach. So letting them just get in and get their hands dirty is probably the best way to do that.
I have an assistant at work, and she's constantly telling me, like half jokingly, because it's in her title, but she goes, let me assist you. She's always telling me, let me assist you. So I'm working on it. Because I'm the same way. Like I'm getting better because I have to. Like I'm the supervisor. There's an assistant supervisor and a crew leader. So there's 3 of us that can manage and do things at the park. And I got to get better. And my boss is even saying, like, hey, they're here to lighten the load off your plate so you can think more big picture, which I struggle with too. And, so I just got to get better at that kind of stuff. And the same thing with, I don't know if I was having a conversation with someone, or I just heard it somewhere, with my Andrea, my wife will ask if I need help doing whatever I'm doing, if I'm outside in the yard or whatever. And so, like, you realize at some point she's going to stop asking if you say no all the time. And then it's something bigger, like just in the kids too. Like the kids are like, Dad, can I help you do this or do that? And, so as much as I want to do things by myself and own things, like I gotta, let people help, just like you.
When it comes to everyday stuff though, you know what that is? I'm a control freak because I like things the way I like it. And that's bad. I think any woman would probably agree to that. I'm sure your wife would even say, no, I'm just going to do that because, she probably won't like the way that you do it. Sure. And to avoid an argument.
Well, when I'm home, when I'm home in the morning, sometimes I either go in work late or I just have the day off. Because she has the morning routine so down, I don't even ask to help. Like, unless she says, hey, Lorenzo, can you pack their lunch? Or, hey, Lorenzo, can you grab their coats or whatever? Like, I don't get involved. I tried a few times, and same thing. Like she was like, yeah, do this or do that. And then it kind of throws her off a little bit. And I noticed that. And I'm like, all right, well, if she needs my help, she'll ask me. If she's running late on something, she'll ask me. But if not, I do not disrupt the morning routine.
Don't get in the mix. Don't stay in your lane. Just autopilot through the day.
Wait, you said my name? What do you need? I'll help you right now.
I gotcha.
I really enjoy leadership podcasts. I listened to one called Learning Leader Show with Ryan Hawk. He has a bunch of leaders and stuff on there. And because that's one big thing for me is I do enjoy leadership and leadership skills and gaining those skills. And I even went to the park system they have this big thing. It's called Maintenance and Management School, where they send you, it's a 2-year program for 1 week a year. You go to West Virginia, this really cool resort called Ogle Bay, and you go and sit through this school. And the first year is a lot of basic stuff. The second year is more like management and leadership and that kind of stuff. And
Okay.
I really enjoyed that, and I always look for more of that opportunity just to learn, not necessarily learn from the school, but there's a lot of other people there from all over the country to learn from too.
So I listen to a lot of stuff out of California. Um, uh, there's a women's leadership, a Latino women's leadership. There is one conference I really have wanted to go to for a while, but it's mainly Latina based. But the cool thing about it is because, in the culture, the Hispanic culture, or however anybody wants to say it, I'm not offending anybody, like whatever you go with,
Yeah, yeah.
roll with it. But for me, as far as any Hispanic, Latino type, um, podcast, I try to gear towards it because even though I am, Mexican by descent, there's an indigenous part of all of us in
Mm-hmm.
some way. But I want to get a different perspective on how things work in other states, other locations, geographically, I think makes a big difference because you get a different idea because things are done differently in those locations. So I'm trying to like get a different take on stuff. And that's why I kind of like lean more towards that West Coast style.
Hmm.
It's kind of feel like I'm, in the Latino Hispanic culture of like, Biggie versus Tupac kind of deal. You know what I mean? Like, going on
Yeah.
the West Coast, leaving my Latinos over here on the East Coast. But so just to try to get some sort of perspective. I was very fortunate when I lived in Columbus, that I was able to meet like a lot of people of diversity. And to be honest with you, Lorenzo, like where we grew up, it's like mainly Mexican descent. It's
Mm-hmm.
You're very few and far between. More different now, I agree. But I just think that you don't have like that Argentinian, that Salvadorian, that Peruvian. And here in Columbus, I was like, whoa, not everybody's Mexican. I'm gonna tell you, I was,
Yeah.
that ignorant person
Sure.
because of where I grew up geographically. So I think now because of that, I've tried to like make those connections to try to see like the differences between our cultures and try to learn how they do things because even though there's a base, it definitely is different for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. And I'm not just saying in Latino culture, it's in every culture. I mean, anybody can get together. We're all individuals, but like to see the differences of where our roots are and, where we come from, that's big. So I've been trying to listen to a lot more of the West Coast style to kind of hear stuff. Plus, there's so much more out there, so much more. And not that I want to drive everything I do in that, Hispanic setting. I love to be in different settings. I mean, right now I've been working with a lot of the political leaders for like the Young Dems and the African American Young Dems. I've worked and before anybody says anything, like I work with everybody, like Democratic, Republican, individual. Like, I mean, we don't. I do not like. I don't want just one perspective. I want everybody's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, not that I'm going to please everybody because I'm still going to probably go with what I believe is right and what's the best thing to do for the situation I am in. And I
Yeah.
feel that we should all do that. But for the most part, I try to like get a perspective of everybody because at the end of the day, sometimes it's the same. And it's just a different way and a different way of speaking it in a different way or saying it in a different way. I'm sure as a manager, sometimes you have to give direction to people while it's the same and it's repetitive differently for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing when it comes to politics.
Well,
I
yeah.
just so you're saying and the crazy part about it though is I will tell you that the older of the generation in politicians is they're more conservative. And I'm like, great, go ahead. I would say that I'm probably a mix of everything. I'm conservative in a lot of decisions that I make, but I'm also because I believe in what's right, what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If it's wrong, it's wrong. Sometimes we have to pick, unfortunately, the lesser of the two evils. So that puts me in the medium. And then sometimes I just am like, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can be liberal too. So I'm not definitive in anything that I do. And so it's been rough because I've been in a lot of settings where people are like, weren't you just at a blah, blah, blah's, fundraiser?
Okay.
Blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, yeah, but why are you defining me that way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't even know me as an individual.
That was one thing I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so we're not allowed to be around people that we don't share likes with. Like, that's not right. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to respect people as long as they respect me, it's
That
tough.
that's why my dad doesn't want to get Facebook. It's
Oh,
because he doesn't want to see like friends or relatives or people that what they post, because
oh,
we like tell him things that our friends and stuff post, and he's like, that's why I don't want to, I just want to know the person, and if he
yeah,
treats me well, he or she treats me well, then we're cool,
yeah,
and
yeah,
because
yeah,
if you get all that extra information, it is very hard to be friends with someone if they're way on one side and you're way on the other side. Like, you forget what initially brought you guys together.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard. So there's this story. I have to find it and give it to you, like send it to you in email. But it was a story about a guy and these two guys who were talking at a coffee shop. Um, Maybe it was a bar, but either way, they
Mm-hmm.
were speaking, but they were different, and they totally just like started conversation, and they both went like this with their opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and it became into like this heated argument. And then over time, they end up becoming the best of friends.
Yeah.
And it was because they literally just needed to talk to one another. I think the biggest thing so for me, I have a problem with getting, people say I have like a little bit of a flair to me, like a Latina flair. I like to call it passion. Um, I speak with a lot of passion, and things. I'm very passionate about
Mm-hmm.
things. So when we get to that, it's hard to control your emotions and just listen to what people are saying. I think the best advice I ever got from one of my managers before they retired was don't don't listen to the tone if you're in front of the person. Don't take a tone in an email. Listen to what the instruction is or what they're trying to relay
Mm-hmm.
and make a decision. That's hard.
Yeah.
Teaching yourself how to be like that is extremely hard. And I think growing and improving. So your dad is like on the same boat with how my mom was. She does not like, when we put certain stuff on Facebook. She's like, before cookies was a thing on our computers, my mom's the cookie in the family. Like, she's like, restricted. You know what I mean? Like, she can't let it happen. When my dad was really ill, she was huge about, I don't want nobody to know. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want you to be putting stuff on Facebook. This is not a sympathy thing. I don't want people to feel obligated to come. But again, culturally, it's a different
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah.
But I respect it. I do. I respect anything that she says. I know recently with my community stuff, I've gone a little bit against the grain. It's actually striked a lot of conversations within her friends because my mom was in the school system, not Perrysburg itself, but she worked for Head Start for
Mm-hmm.
over 43 years.
Wow.
And she started there with no college education. She was behind 4 years in school because of her language barrier, but she stuck with it.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, you were able to, which I really think we should try to get creative to do some of the stuff with now, is that she was able to get her education while she was in the classroom setting. And I know there's some similarities to that now, but it was a little bit different. It was like you worked towards a certificate, you renewed that certificate, and then as you went on, you got credit for some of that experience. And then you went to school. So like when we were in high school, my mom was in college, like
Wow.
50 some years old, like going to school. And I mean, we would be sitting down doing homework together.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I was helping her, she was helping me. But like she did not want social media because she was like, these people, like some people don't like when, I say this or I say that. And a lot of that too was just because of dialect. She just couldn't relay a lot of times what she was saying. And she speaks perfect English. I mean, for the love, she taught for so long. But you're right. Social media isn't what it was back when it started. So I remember Facebook when I was here at OSU with my friends. It was totally like, hey, you were part of this, fraternity chapter in such and such state, and we want to get together and hang out.
Yeah.
It's no longer that. It has become a situation of, and I believe in freedom of expression, clearly, because I'm sure you've you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like, where do you find the happy medium? Because you're not going to please everybody. But your dad is right. It's like you should know people for who they are before you make any type of judgment. I think that should always be something that you do. I mean, I'm with your dad. Now, my dad doesn't have it just because he's like, I don't know what buttons to push. I don't know what
for years, my dad would just look at a computer. It's like, what do I do? Push the big bar? No, that was the extent of. You mentioned you and your mom, like you maybe posting more things than she would like, or saying more things. I had that conversation with my dad too, where when my grandma was alive, she lived in a nursing home, and it was during COVID. You could only go in there, you got to sign this paper, whatever, only certain people. And this woman was giving my dad a hard time about it. And my dad was telling me, I go, Dad, that woman was being racist towards you. Like, you understand it? He goes, I do understand that. I go, so why didn't you say anything? He's like, because I'm going to end up being the bad guy. Like if I say something. But he also grew up where if he said something, he could get killed, or, he'd get hurt, or there'd be a fight or whatever. And we've had conversations too, where I had told my dad, I was like, Dad, it's not like that anymore. I was like, you can say stuff. And I was angry at him for not saying something. I still remember vividly, we were just standing in my garage having this conversation. And I was angry with him that he didn't like speak up for himself, because I want to tell him, like, it's different now, Dad. Like, you can do that. Yes. Is it exactly where we think it should be? No, but it's better, better than it was. And it's probably hard, hard for your mom, and probably hard for my dad when there are times when we do say those kind of things, like, oh my God, what's going to happen to him? Because they're worried about you, or he's worried about me, right? Of what's going to happen to them in their career or in their life, or because they said this one thing. And there's some validity to what they're saying, but also like there's change happening, and it's better.
So I think that that's kind of why me and you are in the positions that we are, is because we are that voice now. We're their unheard voice. We get that opportunity to speak up. I mean, so I'm going to give you a scenario. Racism is serious. Like, even unconscious bias is something that should be addressed. You know what I mean? And I believe that even for myself, because I believe in, sometimes, I'm sitting in groups and I don't even realize that I'm being unfair. Okay. But you're right. So we were this just happened like 2 days ago. We were at a restaurant located in Sylvania. We were watching football, and there was a group of people behind us, and they were all drinking, having a good time, whatever, you're at a sports bar. And one of the guys out loud, I was there with my nephew. So let me give you a little bit of context. I was there with my nephew. He is African-American descent, partially Hispanic, African-American. And the gentleman behind us said the N-word with the hard R in reference to the football players. You would have been mad at me because I didn't even know what to do.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what to say. I knew I had to address it, but I didn't know how. He immediately got up, went into the guy's face, and
Your
he
nephew?
was like, don't say stuff like that. That's inappropriate. And while I wasn't proud of him for standing up, I also knew I had to de-escalate the situation. But Lorenzo, I was speechless because I didn't even realize how bad it was. Now, when we were in school, and I don't think I've ever told you this, we have a teacher that still is there today that has made a couple of racial comments towards me when I was in school. And that was hard. I mean, it made me not want to go to school, like, a lot, and I I never stood up for myself. And then the one time I did, whew, I got so much backlash. That was probably the only time I ever was in the principal's office at school. And I didn't even go and see our main principal. I went to see Mrs. Peterman, our assistant principal. And she was like, this is out of your character. Like, I've never, and I was like, because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. But the problem is that older mentality of what your dad was talking about, of sweeping it under the rug, being submissive, and just disregarding it because you know the person you are. I should have probably took that high road. You know what I mean? In that situation, because I was a child, I shouldn't be talking to adults like that. But you're right. So it's like certain things trigger me, but I don't realize how bad it is until, you're faced with it. And then when you do, it's like, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah.
I had no idea what to do, So sometimes I kind of feel like I'm not throwing you in this bucket, but sometimes we can also be not cognizant at that time. Like we're just stunned by the comments or the things happening around us that we don't even react. But I was so glad I didn't react with my passion, as I like to call it, because I probably would have been in a lot more trouble. But it's hard. It's really hard. And the worst part about it is, this is my experience. I'm speaking from my experience. I experience that more at home than I do in Columbus. Even just going into the mall there, sometimes I've had people that are like, that'll follow me around at H&M. And, and I had a conversation with the kid who was doing it, because I understood as an adult that that's their job. They're being instructed, right? They're training by people like me and you in the positions that we're in. You know what I mean? So I have to be understanding of that. But when I got up to him, I was asking him, and he's like, I was so uncomfortable doing it. And I knew you recognized it. You know what I mean? He was cognizant of what I was feeling. And he goes, and I felt bad. And I told him, I said, that's because you're a good person.
Yeah.
That's because you knew that it was not, while you were doing a task to prevent something from happening, I guess.
Potentially. Yeah.
Potentially, or shall we say, like in the term, allegedly. You know what I mean? I couldn't fault him. I could not fault him for that. And we had a good conversation. I ended up talking to him for like 20 minutes. I'm sure the lady behind me was super pissed because I was just there. I felt like I needed to say something. I felt like I needed to talk to him and have a conversation, and he walked away and it was great. And so now when I go to H&M, I see him every once in a while and he's like, he waves.
Well,
I shouldn't be in H&M anyway, because I'm like, almost 500 years old now. But I went I needed a basic t-shirt. So I was like, I'm not paying, $45 for sure at Thirds or JC Penney.
All this leadership and fire and passion really leads into what I take as you're like one of your main things right now is what's going on at the Perrysburg Heights community. So my base knowledge of this is ever since I moved to Perrysburg, like I understood Perrysburg Heights and what it was. It's very similar to where my dad grew up. I know my dad's town is a little bit bigger, but it's very similar, like demographically, how it's set up, everything. And it whenever I drive through there, because my daughter does baton at that community center there, and it has never been my home, but I feel like driving through, I was like, man, this feels like Welder, which is my dad's hometown, was a Welder. I was like, this is what it feels like, and it's comfortable there. And so my base knowledge is it from what I understand is the city is trying to annex Perrysburg Heights community.
So actually the city has
township.
Yeah. So we are township. Let's start there. We're township. We are surrounded by the city. I've talked to some people at the Department of Justice at a local level and also at a state level. And technically that's supposed to not be allowed. I don't know. So don't hold me to it. I'm sure we'll get some people to correct me on that. But what I'm going to say is we are township. So basically what happened was during COVID, the city started to have, they had to recreate a land use plan. Land use plans are created throughout every area, some at 5-year increments, some at 10. That's usually, the time periods. And it's basically of an assessment of what the projection of the future is.
Okay.
So along 25, so everybody understands, along 25, which is Dixie Highway, so you got Levis on one side, and then you got on the other side, little strip malls, I guess you could say, or, retail strips, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is city. Long time ago when the community was founded, in 1943, what is it? May. So it was in May, we were 1923, August 11th.
You said 100 years, right?
So because we're celebrating 100 year. Oh my goodness, my mathematicians. Ooh, not math in this. So August 11th, 1923 was when the Heights was founded. So all those people that built there in that area were migrant workers. A lot of people don't even know that it wasn't just Mexican Americans. It was Irish too. My family was some people were there right when it started. My mom and dad's family actually traveled a lot. So my aunts and uncles are born in a lot of states because they migrated all around. So they landed in Perrysburg Heights as the last one. So over off of 5 Point Road, where they now have, I think it's like an assisted living. I think St. John's Catholic Church is over there now.
Yeah.
So that, if you go further down going into, and don't east, west, north, south, not my jam, sorry. So when you're going down on 5 Point that way, there used to be migrant farm there.
That's east, by the way, just so you
So when you go down there, there was a migrant farm, and I don't know if you can still see them. I think there's still like some of the little smaller housing that's there. So my parents worked the lands all around that area. And then the farmer who owned the 90 acres of what the Heights was then, he started to sell the lots to the people that were working the land.
Mm.
And so some of them bought them at $1 a lot. And so my grandparents built homes there. So a lot of those homes they can't be historical, because a lot of people are like, oh, you guys can claim historic. Well, we can't, because they're makeshift homes. So they're not all of them are what, some housing should be. It's no different than you going into another community that's older, like East Toledo or West Toledo, where a lot of those houses don't have up to code items because that was just not what was required back then,
Yeah.
So a lot of these homes are not that way. A lot of people are like, oh, it's a mobile park. Well, while it started as some of the houses are mobile, I like to educate people and tell them, well, you know what? Our community center was a mobile home too, because it was a construction trailer before we built the facility. So the housing there is a little bit different. So what ended up happening is during COVID, the city decided to do a land use plan. The land use plan literally, and if you look it up, you type in Perrysburg Heights Community, you will see the land use plan that they had projected. It was putting in what they called affordable living, which I don't know if anybody knows, but the average affordable living housing in Perrysburg, the average is $275 to $325 for housing. So $275,000 to $325,000 is the average. That is
really.
Yes, that is the average. And that's in the land use plan. That data is in the land use plan. So what they did is then they basically, in conversation in some of the council meeting calls, which anybody can look up, the zoning administrator makes the comment of, well, we looked at it as a blank slate.
The Heights, where people live.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I also have them on recording in my own when we met after the fact, which I'll get there. So he says, we looked at it as a blank slate. If you look at it, it puts a park in the middle of our neighborhood and housing around it of that average to low to moderate income housing, which is 325 to 275.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in this meeting and hardly anybody's at this first council meeting. Okay. So I became wind of it. So I have been in the mortgage industry for over 16 years in Columbus. I've done everything, underwrite, processed for relocation companies. I've done closing. I mean, when the housing market dropped, I was in the mortgage world. So I have some familiarity. Prior to this, I was in title for homes. So I know a lot about and easements and et cetera, and meets and bounds. I've worked with a lot of surveyors. I've had a lot of friends, that I've had good connections with. That's kind of how I got the job where I'm at today, is because we were a smaller group that worked for this larger company. So anyway, they were doing this and I'm looking at this stuff and I'm thinking to myself, you're projecting in the next 10 years, this is what this community is going to look like. So let's relax. When I was a kid, I remember going to, this isn't the first time we've been fighting. This has been constant. I mean, constant.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So we have, if you look up articles, there are some from the early 90s where the city talks about annexation and how they're going to restructure the neighborhood. If we were to be annexed, we are not historical. So we wouldn't fall in the bracket of what downtown Perrysburg is. So the question is, how do you have the conversation then? Because you're going to now implement all these things that the city requires that the township doesn't. You're not going to be able to do that without, fines and do, certain things. These people, I don't think that, and this is my opinion, we have progressed a lot. Like this neighborhood is generation.
Yeah.
So we're talking like even my generation lives there, an older generation, like the in-between generation so Generation X and millennials are still there. They don't have, not all of them are low to in a lower bracket. They are middle-class citizens. The only difference is a lot of my cousins have inherited this property and they look at me and they're like, why would I go anywhere else? I got a good school system. I'm taking care of my home. I'm doing what I need to do for my family. They're living within their means, which is what we've been taught our whole entire life in my community. So the other thing is that, so when they were doing this land use plan, they did this, and I'm sitting here and I'm at awe because of the way that the city of Perrysburg just put this out there like that. It's a slap in the face. It is like straight up, you are no longer existing. You are not a community. I don't care if you agree with them or not. What I ask is people put themselves in that position of, how would you feel if somebody just wiped you out?
Yeah.
Like, that's not fair. So I'm sitting there and I'm just listening. I'm not saying anything, but I am so astonished. If anybody wants to go listen to that council meeting, please do. I am so astonished at how people are speaking. Now, my mom and dad experienced more issues back in the day. So when I said, let's, rewind. So in the early 90s, there was issues about annexation. So even when we were in high school, Lorenzo, I was going to meetings in county and in city and township because of all this stuff going on. So I may not have felt that way as a kid, but at the end of the day, my own parents were still fighting to be able to keep a home where they wanted it to be. And how do you do that? Like, you're constantly not putting all these stressors on these people for like the living, like they need a place to live. So then, so that was in the early 90s. In the 50s, it was the same. Between the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was not the neighborhood that it is today. I'm going to give everybody that. I'm sure everybody can go off of what they want to say about it, and people know the history of it. Whatever. I'm not going to deny it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
In the 90s, people in Perrysburg uptown used to reference the heights as Machete Heights. And that's an article too that's in the library. There's a whole article about Machete Heights. We're talking about not being a part of something. We called it racism. I'm going to call it what it is because I'm not going to be unapologetic for the way that I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
It is racist. It's injustice. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah.
If Perrysburg has on their websites a welcoming community, how?
You don't feel that. Yeah.
No. Make it make sense. And so there's a whole thing that when we sign for credit cards, it's an asterisk and it's got little tiny print and then everybody like speed reads over it like at 5 million. Let's do that then.
Yeah.
I mean,
If people, so I'm just playing devil's advocate. If someone sees that plan and goes, but Leah, look what they're doing to the neighborhood. They're going to make it beautiful and it's going to have a park and it's going to have all these houses. Like, why wouldn't you want that?
For face value, it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. What are you going to do with all those people that are there now?
Yeah.
So, and even if they say, well, they're not going to kick them out. No, but you build one, like the current house, the current triplex that's being built. You build one, everybody around you is going to start getting squeezed out by taxes.
Yeah.
It's going to be then, if it's not taxes, then it's going to be a battle of, okay, well, now these people are deceased. How are they passing on their home? And then, so the majority of investors will not be there. So let's go. So then Levis came in, right?
Yeah.
Even the people who built Levis, which I don't know if anybody knows this, but the people who built Levis also built Easton in Columbus.
Okay.
So, they built Levis and Levis was like, no, that's fine. Leave them alone. Like, they're good. That's an article that's out there too. Perrysburg has always tried to see what they could do. I mean, let's be honest. You just said it. It's prime land.
Yeah.
It's prime land.
Mm-hmm.
That money. So to me, the reason why I fight is because it should be up to my community to earn the benefits, just like any other community.
Yeah.
If they choose to sell, that's their right. I'm not stopping anybody from that. What I'm saying is nobody should force you into a conversation where therefore you make a decision that isn't financially beneficial for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you're right. It is one thing. Cause when we built the Metro Park that I managed down in East Toledo now, that was our main thing too, is like, all right, what are we doing to prevent gentrification of the neighborhood across Front Street? Like there's houses all over the place there. They've been there for forever. And to our credit, we've been doing as much as we can to help that community. You know, it's and even Lathrop, the construction contractor that we use, 2 years in a row, they held building, they held community projects where for 2 days, like whole streets and houses were getting like, hey, they basically knocked on the doors like, hey, what do you need? What can we help you with? And we were painting houses, doing concrete, landscaping, mowing, like doing all these things, you know, because we don't want people to be forced out. Again, if they decide to sell their home because someone's offering them all this money, you know, so be it. But we don't want that either. Like we want them to stay there and enjoy this park and enjoy what we built for them. Like this is their park. It's in East Toledo. So it is a big thing to be like, yeah, all this stuff is nice. And then what about them? Well, we'll just say, here's some money and they'll go away.
Yeah.
Like it's not always what people want.
No, and to be honest with you, I have a feeling that even if they went on with the plan and the other discussions that I've had privately with local political leaders, the goal would even to be to build more apartments and build other stuff there. So while I say to you, you asked me the question of, you know, what would I say to people like that? I would say I agree with you of looking at something at its face value. Because that's essentially what you're doing. You're looking at the picture and saying, it's fantastic. And I can't tell you that you're wrong for that. What I can tell you is that eminent domain should not be something that's...
Yeah.
I mean, it's a constitutional protection. You can't do that. And so, like, when city council was like, oh, well, we're not doing eminent domain, as the meetings continued and continued and continued. There is one meeting that the mayor himself says, when I say to him, and when other people from not just my neighborhood, but of his own constituents say to him, so are you saying eminent domain is on the table? He said, well, yeah, they all agreed, which we knew, but they denied it up front because they couldn't handle the pressure that they were getting. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
And the reason how I know that is because I know two people that were political leaders at that time that even told me, Leah, they were not expecting for you to come up and start to speak and have some sort of awareness to what was happening. And they couldn't get their political campaign right, which is what it's called, right? A political, you got to all be on the same page. When somebody comes in and ruffles the grain or goes against the grain or ruffles a feather, you're going to lead off of emotion and you're not even prepped for that. Why are attorneys, you know what I mean? You got to be prepped to be able to come in to know how, okay, you're probably going to hear this and you're probably going to hear that. You got to focus on this, And we talked a little bit
and for people who don't know, just in case, eminent domain is just basically a municipality coming in and saying, no, we're going to take that property.
Yep.
That's
and then the people don't get anything from it.
Yeah.
So now generationally, like I told you, this neighborhood is generationally. While there are millennials and Gen X that live there today, with this land use plan, ironically, this is where I start to be like, okay, you guys can tell anybody what you want, but I know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
This is a money grab. I can almost guarantee you there's already a deal that has been made for this neighborhood. And they got to follow through with it.
And I'm going to tell you how they're trying to figure out how to make it happen.
Yep. And I'm going to tell you how I feel, why I feel that is the best assumption.
Yeah.
When the neighborhood started to cycle out, when people were passing away because of age,
mm-hmm.
Some of those people didn't have, generations that pass, to pass it on. And if they did, those generations didn't live here anymore. So we had investors come in. Investors, and anybody can look up this, the Secretary of State, there are LLCs that currently have agents who are working in political nature in the city of Perrysburg and in the township. When the land use plan went into effect, I thought it was very ironic that at that time, a council member, Corey Coleman, and his brother, Joel Coleman, who is a judge in Wood County,
mm-hmm.
they acquired land. They purchased land. That's all in, you can look all that up in the county. Everything mm-hmm. is there.
Mm-hmm.
They purchased land during this period of time. Our township, one of our township trustees also has land in the community. Louisville Title also has land in the community. All these people are photographed together. All these people hang out with each other.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that also when I brought it to their attention, nobody denied it. Nobody denied it. And that's all recorded and public on the Perrysburg City Council website. Nobody denied it. I said, I don't think it's by convenience that you all have acquired this property. And again, I am not upset that my neighborhood decided to sell, but these guys lowballed them. Sure. I mean, look at how much it is. Sure. I mean, they lowballed them tremendously. We even had a community person working with other people who they all hang out with each other. And now all of a sudden, this person has land in our community. So they're buying lots at a time. We have people, and again, like, listen, Lorenzo, this is just my honest opinion. They're not going to stop.
I was just going to say, do you think it's just a matter of time?
Oh, yeah. And yeah. I think, and the worst part about it is what makes me upset is that you're coming in and you're doing it in a way that's just not right. And the fact that you're okay with it says a lot about you. And I am not a voting constituent of Perrysburg.
Mm-hmm.
But how can people be advocating for my community using the community center and not thinking about the political leaders that they have trying to only gain for themselves? Because here's the thing, is where does it stop then? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of other older neighborhoods in the city limits of Perrysburg. So is that going to start being a thing for them? Because they're located by a lot of commercial development. Is that going to be now a conversation for them? Because if you look at it, look behind Kroger, that whole land piece there, one of the trustees who works for the realty company that's there sold it. They're building more apartments. Yeah. What is the main thing people complain about in Perrysburg? Taxes and school levies. Mm-hmm. Why is nobody holding these elected officials accountable in the sense of, if they're doing economic development and keep developing the area, they're not even worried about the school system then?
Yeah.
So how are we getting the best for our community as a whole? So this isn't like, when I said in my video, this isn't just about the Heights. The Heights is bringing to light what is really happening in all around of us. Mm-hmm. It's not going to stop. And so when I was in the council meeting, Tim McCarthy looked at me and said, I have no idea what you're signing up for, but you're signing up for something. Because I was going to be like a liaison between township and city. Uh-huh. The worst part about it is when we were fighting for the whole land use plan situation, and we brought to light that Corey was, had vested interests. Technically, by law, he would have to abstain from any vote. And the law director told him, oh, well, you can vote over the whole plan. You just can't vote for Heights. Well, you can't do that. You're not taking it out. You're putting it together.
Yeah.
Well, then that law director resigned. The city administrator resigned. Currently, right now, the city is still being investigated for other stuff. There is so much stuff going on. And I'm going to tell you right now, Lorenzo, this made me think to myself, is there any good people out here in this world? Mm-hmm. And even people in the city limits, Lorenzo, over by the Hall Prairie School.
Yeah.
There was a constituent that came in there. Well, there was two that came in there. And this was during our land use plan talk, because they were like, so you're going to do this to them. So then is our park there? Because we're paying HOA dues to go to the city for a park for our neighborhood that you guys never even built in our neighborhood when you said you were going to do it. Mm. So where's all that money going? It's unfortunate, because even people are starting to, I call it a wake up movement in Perrysburg. We're part of that wake up movement. Whether people want to give us, it's not even about giving us credit. I'm literally bringing to light what is happening. There's people in Perrysburg who use the community center. And I'm going to just say this. My committee is not associated with PHC. We do not work. We work in conjunction and we partnership on things for the neighborhood, but we are not under them. We are our own thing.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because I even kind of went to the board meeting and held them accountable, because I was like, none of you guys are there. None of you are advocating for the community in which the center was built for.
Yeah. What's the point of the center if there's no community?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I literally said this to them. I said, unless you are on the same boat as everybody else in the city of Perrysburg Council, okay, and in the township, are you guys on the same boat that one day the only thing that'll be in this community center for this community will be a plaque and it'll say, in memory of Perrysburg Heights Community?
Yeah. Wow.
Or are we going to be on a bench? Because this year, while we had sponsorship and we had the festivals and stuff to raise money for our community center to build that.
Yeah.
while that was happening and people were donating, and I thank so many people for doing that because I benefited a lot from that community center when it was what it was when I was a kid. I thank so many people for that. But a lot of that, like, I don't know if people even know that, like, the only food tent that existed at the festival for a little while was my mom and all the older ladies that were in the neighborhood. They were called the church ladies. The ones that helped. They made all the food for the 3 days of that event, and they got the community center would, let them, rent out certain rooms and they would do certain things like go to the movies and play bingo and stuff like that. But they donated their time.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about not just I'm passionate about my community as a whole, but I feel like we're all, like, every entity around us is like picking at us,
Mm-hmm.
and while I say to you that I feel that they won't stop and that it's inevitable, I'm not going to be here in 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God, at least I hope not. And I know that it'll change, but I don't want it to change if it doesn't need to.
Correct.
I want it to evolve.
Yeah.
I want it to be a place where that community was founded. And I know it kind of went off on a tangent. That community was founded by people who came to this country and worked that land for a better life,
mm-hmm.
and to better a life for their kids. Everybody, I don't care what color you are, where you come from, everybody should have a right to great education and a safe environment and a home that they can afford.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody deserves an opportunity to better themselves. It is their choice if they choose not to. That community is what it is. That community is a place of opportunity. And to take that away is crazy. If the city of Perrysburg and the township, because I haven't even talked about township, if the township cared, we could be a place of innovation.
Mm-hmm.
If we work together, that community itself could be a place where people from California, Arizona, Texas, Montana, I don't care where, could use it and say, these people are doing this. This city and this township believed in this community and they want to better it and they want to give an opportunity. They want to have low to moderate income housing, not because of a gain to be a judge or a new political leader or something, or get something for it. They're doing it because they believe that everybody deserves an opportunity. And how are they doing it? They're working with the community to better the community, to bring houses up to code, to bring homes to that area where people can afford and have that opportunity. Now, listen, we talked about it a minute. I'm not about always handouts. I'm about hand ups. Because I believe that handouts kind of get to the point where it's expected sometimes. And I don't want people to be like, okay, well, we need more. We got to learn how to have people do that critical thinking we're talking. We got to have people to do those steps to better themselves. Sometimes we got to let them go and they're going to fall and we're going to be there to pick them up. To me, that's what my community is. Mm-hmm. My community has always stood behind whoever is there to better it. And some people will say, well, yeah, because they stood behind people and look at what they did to the community center. Look at what they did. The point is this: we're human. We make mistakes. We entrust in people we shouldn't. It happens in everybody's everyday life. We trust things and we trust people because we want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But you can't fault them because they fell to something that was happening that they had no knowledge about.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for teaching me all about this stuff. Cause I knew very baseline knowledge of like what's happening in this community and what they're trying to do. Is there something that you would like people to, anybody who listens to this, either like a website or this, or just something that they could go to, or is there some place that you could send them, or what would you like people to take from this?
What I ask is that while face value items are the best, and I want everybody to make a judgment based on what they feel is right. Okay. So my committee is the Heights Heritage Committee, and we are a group of community members, and also some of the members, family members who don't live in the community center anymore.
Mhm.
But our goal right now, what we're working towards, which is kind of, we saw me with Marcy Kapner. I had an
Yeah.
opportunity there to speak with her. I will tell you that she also repeated 3 times in the conversation of when I was telling her what was going on. She literally said to me 3 times, "This is very concerning that this is happening at a local level. This is very concerning that local municipalities are doing this."
Yeah.
She said that 3 times, even when we were talking about education.
Sure.
So I told her about our Facebook. We do not have a website up. I'm trying to figure out how to do it. I was just going to put one up and just put it up, but I think we need to have a portal for residents and a portal for people who are supportive of our community, so they can kind of see the things, because everything that we do in partnership with PHCA, it's welcome to all.
Yeah.
So Heights Heritage Committee is what's on Facebook, and you can follow that page. I put up there the township meeting stuff, anything that has to do with our community center that's happening in the city or in the township. So that way people know, like, it's a timeline for them
Yeah.
to
Okay.
speak only specifically about certain things that are happening. And I do try to caption it like, this involves us, or this is just the general agenda, and etc. Because the township doesn't have website as great as the city does. So they can follow us on our Facebook page. When we do partnerships with PHCA, just so you know, a lot of that comes out of my committee's pockets. Like, it's literally just all of us putting money together to do it. So like, your guys' family was so amazing to help us last year to do our Christmas lighting contest for the neighborhood. When we do that for the neighborhood, you should see the turnaround that, people start investing and doing stuff. And
Yeah.
I want to see that. I want engagement. You know what I mean? So they can follow our Facebook page. They can definitely, on the Facebook page, there is like a Google number that they can get a hold of me. We also have our email, which is the Heights Heritage Committee at gmail.com. They're more than welcome to email there, ask any questions. If I don't know the answer, I definitely can get somebody to give them an answer. I'm pretty accessible. If they ping you, or what do they say, DM you, you can send them my way, through my personal lines of channel. I'm more than happy to sit and have a conversation, even if it's a tough conversation. I'm more than happy to sit and have a conversation. I like Starbucks or Big B just like anybody else. So, you know what I mean? Like, we can have a conversation, but they can reach us at those 2 main things, or email, or our social media Facebook page. We do have an Instagram. We have a TikTok. We do have, and the TikTok is the Heights Heritage Committee too. So everything is the same.
I'll post all those things in the show notes so people can click on them through there too. So
so they can reach us through any of that, and I answer most of the messages. If it's not me, my cousins are doing it, and they'll send them over to me if they don't have the answers. So the other thing I can tell you is the bigger takeaway too is that December 16th, August 11th was our 100-year anniversary for the neighborhood, the land there. August 16th, we're having an event at PHCA. It'll be like
December 16th.
December 16th
at
12 p.m. We're gonna have like snacks, cooking, decorating for the kids to take. We'll have little activities for them. We cannot have a fiesta without a piñata, so there'll be a piñata there. We will definitely have information. I've asked PHCA to provide any information that the general public is allowed to partake, because we have seen a lot of now that the schools are a lot involved at PHCA. There is a lot of kids coming from outside the community, which I think is fantastic. That's great to have everybody come together. So take advantage of some of those programming opportunities that they have there. I've worked a lot with one of the social workers there at PHCA, and we got the GED. I mean, I told them the GED was huge. We got people taking the course now. I think we got 10 to 12 people in the smaller class right now. But yeah, so I don't know. I totally went off, but you if you want to get in touch with me, you can always find me, and I am that person that while everybody gets on me about it, I do give out my personal information because I love to talk to people and have a conversation.
Yeah.
So the things that we do coming up to be, as they would say in a novella, to be continued. We will be working with organizations, and I've been looking at how to grant write for our committee. Our committee will eventually be a 501c3, and we're going to start to do things where we start helping the neighborhood have their houses come up to code and get some of the things set for them. It's kind of like a Habitat for Humanity kind of situation. We won't be working with them, but we're going to be, and I'm not closing the door on it, but right now it'll be us raising funds to help better the neighborhood and get people, in good housing and make sure that when they do choose to sell, they're getting their full bang for their buck, and they're not having to worry about some of that stuff. So.
Okay. Well, anything I can do to help, or if you want to come, if there's stuff that you want to talk about, you want to come back on, reach out to me. I'm involved as much as I'm able to be, and we've done stuff with the football team there. Actually, we're doing it again, this spring with cleanup. So anything that you need from me or potentially could need, I might not be able to help you, but maybe point you in the right direction. Just let me know.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everything, Lorenzo. I always appreciate your advocacy, and I appreciate, and make sure you let your wife know. I always appreciate you coming and volunteering your time. I know taking away from family is hard, so I appreciate everything.
Well, thanks, Leah, and thanks again for coming on here. And again, please check out all the links in the show notes to contact them. So thanks, Leah.
All right, bye.
Thanks to Leah for coming on the podcast today. It was a great conversation. It was, again, like I said at the top of the show, it was really eye-opening to hear what's happening with the Perrysburg Heights community, and what basically sounds like something that can't be stopped ultimately, but it is a fight worth fighting. And if you're interested, again, check out the show notes for all their contact information, all their social medias. Contact me if that's easiest for you, and I can get you in the right spots. If you are part of the city or township and would like to come on here and talk about, give your perspective, feel free. The email is thenerdballpodcast@gmail.com. More than happy to talk to any sides of this conversation. I said it in the podcast, this neighborhood reminds me of my dad's neighborhood, and it's a comfortable place whenever I drop my daughter off there, or I've visited. I've sat and talked to Leah's dad in their home, and it's helping. The football team helped the community clean up last year. We're going to do it again this April. So it's an important part of Perrysburg, and it's concerning of what's happening there and how it's happening. I think things like this happen over time, but how it's happening, how Leah described it happening, and who's doing it and what they're doing is a lot concerning, really. But again, this sounds like it's an inevitability, according to Leah, but they're not going to go down fighting, and I'll help as much as I can. And if you want to help, check out the show notes. This podcast isn't just for one side. Again, if someone from the municipalities around there wants to come on here and talk about it, please reach out to the nerdballpodcast@gmail.com. But that's it. Again, a great episode coming out after 200. I appreciate Leah telling us the story of what's happening. I hope you guys have a great week. As always, thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuttlefish Graphics, Big Daddy Graphics, and Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab for always helping out the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.